So we are going to talk about craft and industry today. Is there anything that immediately springs to mind when I say craft or when I say industry? Like, do you have a quick association with those words?
I think the first is, again, what is craft? In the sense that there's thousands of craft in the world. But over the year, I mean, we work with many craftsmen. And let's say that we discover, at least from our experience, that there are three main crafts. One is the French one is the Japanese one, and one is the Italian one. Of course, there are millions of others, but when we talk about quality craft, these three ways of thinking about craft are so extremely different. And they have a different, again, relationship with industrial process. So let's say the French one is what we consider the luxury craft, the idea, I mean, Hermès probably, we immediately understand that type of high quality material, precision, this luxury perceived type of value, And then when you work with the Japanese one, sometimes you barely cannot see if a teapot was made 1 year ago or 50 years ago or 500 years ago. Because for them it was like repeating a gesture, repeating until they reach the perfection of the gesture. And when we have the Italian craft, which is where we are grown with, the Italian craft is about trials, experimenting. When we design, a lamp, we have our own small company. We do a lamp, we do it to the craftsman. The first 10s are fine. Then the 11th is slightly different. And then you go, why is it that different? Oh, I thought that would be very nice to change this element, etc. And I mean, at least for our experience, this process of constantly using the craft to experiment and to do things is what has made the Italian, at least industrial design, grow in a certain way. Because in our experience, this craft is what inspire and becomes the way to trial than industrial working. I don't know, with craft, you can make mistake. I mean, not a big problem. You make a chair, okay, you do 10, they're slightly wrong, okay, that's okay. With industrial process, you have stem, molding, etc. You do a mistake, and then that's really a mess. So somehow for us, we use craft to try things that we cannot try with the industrial process. So they're strongly complementary in our experience.
You think the same thing? Craft industry, it's hard to hear as a German person about Japan, Italy, and France.
Yeah.
And but of course, in one way, it's right. I think the culture, or maybe also the government, like in France, they protect their crafts and the knowledge much more and appreciate it more than in Germany. Like in France, there was a support of small workshops during COVID financially to survive. And it was not like this in Germany. Even we have some nice brands like Nymphenburg or Lamy with the pens, and they do a lot still by hand. But I think the perception is much stronger in those three countries you mentioned. And I, like Michele, I was curator at the Homo Faber exhibition 2 years ago already. It was running also this year, which is an exhibition in Venice taking place for 1 month. It was September. Really dedicated to craftsmanship, to all the treasures we can find in museums like the V&A, for example, but also new treasures. So, and there you see with the artisans showing their products there that they are not just located in the three countries. They are also nowadays experts in Amsterdam or in Denmark or wherever. And even young people. So a craftsman is not always the old one with a long beard. There are a lot of young people in the 20s. They try completely new technique. There was a guy called Julian Feller 2 years ago, and he was carving out of a solid block of wood a piece which looked like lace at the end. So it was transparent, like a 1 millimeter thick, and it was a piece of like textile. And it was just amazing. I asked him how long he was working on it, and he dedicated 1 year in working on this piece. And at the end, there are collectors for crafted objects. And one bought this piece for his collection. So it's really amazing to see what human hands can shape. But of course, if we think about furniture, of course, Italy is there very, very strong. That's why I really appreciate to work with Italian brands like we talked about, Tortona Frau, just before, which is an amazing brand, really dedicated into details. And you have the craftsmen there who can realize the ideas of designers. And like other countries, like in Scandinavia or in Denmark, a lot of companies close and move somewhere else for production.
Good.
So speaking of craftspeople with long beards, do you know any people like that?
Yeah, I know one since 22 years with a very long beard, and he crafted things himself. I started. I mean, yeah, that's a funny story I was telling yesterday. I started working with him 22 years ago. I was studying, and I had an interview with him because of people that know each other. And he asked me just one question: "Are you able to use a chainsaw?" No, I just studied design, but I can try. And I started working with him, and I discovered this way of making things. I mean, the chainsaw allowed us to do sketches in a three-dimensional way, you know? So using your hand, the mind and the hand, and then this material with this object that is so, I mean, it's very even hard to use, to control, but it's like making a pencil sketch very rough, you know? And that was, I think, where I discovered this part of the, at least, creative process of us that started from this very crafty way of doing, no? And then this goes to some real craftsmen, better than us, and making the mock-ups and trying and making experimentation. And then some of these ideas then becomes industrial product, and some other stays as ideas that remain sculptural object, in some case some craft object. And it's how these ideas evolve, that can evolve in really many different ways from the first handmade piece.
And we have a live demonstration, so the chainsaws are in the back. We're going to bring those out at the end.
Yes. And we did, at a certain point, we were doing performance. Michele wanted to have this performance around Italy, where we have a blog, the music, the sketches, and then like no sound, and making this performance of sculpting little houses. That was very fun. I had so much fun.
And Sebastian, you mentioned, the handmade, and this craftsman who spent a year kind of making this piece. Does it feel like craft demands that sort of time and care and attention? I mean, but to me at least, industry seems to go against that, because industry almost seems to want things to be done as quickly as possible, on as large a scale as possible, so as many pieces as you can make. How do you see craft and industry working together in terms of an amazing piece, but done at maybe a larger scale?
Yeah, first of all, to mention, I got a chainsaw last year for Christmas from my parents, and thanks God it's an electric one, so I can switch it on. Because in the past I was pulling the string for half an hour, and then there was something missing. I have to change this things. Yeah. So no, it's fun, and I cut some trees in January.
Do we have the chain? Can we bring those out actually?
But no tree for the boxes, man.
Yeah.
Well, working with craftsmen, and for me it was from the beginning of my studio life at my university, because I graduated in Offenbach next to Frankfurt, and there was a German leather industry. Some people maybe know the story. And during my studies, the university closed the leather workshop, they closed the ceramic workshop, they invested in 3D printers and CNC machines and all these new technologies, which are amazing. And parallel to this, the city lost all its identity about leather workshops. So Montblanc moved the production first to Florence, and now somewhere more to the east. And Goldfile and all those established brands left Offenbach, and the city lost its identity. And that was the moment I was really thinking about working with craftsmen and real materials. Then I did this glass table with brass for Classicon later at Salone Satellite. I showed it. And it was completely kind of swimming against the river, doing something different at that time, because it was really about new materials. But for me, it was always so great to go to the workshop, looking behind the scenes, and to work with the people together. Even it takes sometimes longer, or you have to be patient. Now we work on the computer, we print it, if possible, at the 3D printer in the workshop, and then we have a small scale chair and so on. But if you work on a rug collection, for example, you can't print it in plastic or whatever, or you can't CNC mill. You really have to wait for the people in Kathmandu doing knot by knot to get maybe 40 to 40 centimeters sample 3 months later, so it takes time. And this can be just produced by hand. You cannot produce rugs hand knotted ones, of course, not in a big scale. Of course, you can do tufted ones, maybe faster, but then it's sometimes a different quality. And I think that's good that there are some products you can just do by hand. It's the same in going to Murano. So some objects in glass are just possible if there's a master glass blower and he's doing this in a small number or unique pieces. Other pieces, of course, can be industrialized and produced in a big scale. But I think that's always interesting to experience. And of course, you need the craftsmen or the experts at the beginning to do the prototypes, but later maybe you can translate it also in a bigger amount of production, more industrialized way, which is, of course, interesting also for me as a designer.
And it seems like both of you have kind of mentioned craft is at the beginning and then industry follows in a sense. Like craft is your time to trial and experiment. And then do you hit a point where you're like, all right, this is ready for
it always depends on what kind of product you work on. And of course, you need the craftsmen or the engineers, and sometimes you need the right balance, Like we have the real physical meeting like this, but nowadays we have more and more digital calls also. So it's about the right balance between both ways of production.
Yeah, I think they need to coexist. I don't know, maybe a few years ago it was like, okay, the world was going to be all industrialized. But now we see it, and we are really discovering that for us as human beings, the contact with handmade object is relevant. It's really, a few years ago, last year we worked with an anthropologist on a project, and really even from an anthropological point of view, the relationship with things that are made with hand, made with natural material, that are imperfect, are things that make us feel better at the end. So. And fortunately, we still give value to these things. Even the combination. I don't know if you, again, extremely industrialized product. If you guess, I don't know, the Apple Watch or a supercar. The Apple Watch that is more desirable is the Hermes one with something that's made. And the same, you buy a Ferrari and you pay premium to have a Poltrona Frau seat on it. And it's not just about the branding. It's really about the perception that, okay, this is something that has been extremely mass product and extremely technical, developed perfectly. But in it, there's also something that has been handmade with the value that we still likely give to time that is spent when we associate it to craftsmen. When it's about industry, time is, you don't give value. You start, okay, fast, you mass produce. But with the craft, when you see the story behind the time, you see what it means to have an object that has, maybe even some imperfection, because at that moment that guy was looking somewhere else. I don't know. It's part of a more human world, I would say. But I strongly believe that the combination, whether it is starting from the craft as the beginning of the process for prototyping, for doing proof, etc., or if it is just imagination, but still they have to, they can coexist and they must coexist. I hope more and more. Even to give life to, what Sebastian was saying, to all these manufacturing companies and knowledge that was dying. And luckily we found over the last few years that there are young guys that are opening some laboratories where maybe they use CNC machines, but also a bit of craft, but also, and that makes me, feel positive about the things that we're not just making everything the same and everything industrialized, but that the two things can and hopefully must survive.
And I think you both have kind of mentioned a side of this question that I wanted to examine, which is when industrial awareness, like when craft enters industrial awareness, something is lost sometimes. Like you mentioned, identity can be lost from those workshops and often back. Maybe the human touch can be lost. What do you think is lost and what do you think is gained when craft and industry meet? Maybe I'll start with you, Sebastian.
Yeah, well, like you said, they have to coexist next to each other, and I don't know if it's a loss. It's just a different attitude or way of producing an object. You know, here's a nice example. Of course, it's knitted and it has the transfer from the hand knitting to the industrial knitting. No? They are not all knitted by Patricia herself. So there are machines, of course, producing it. And of course, there was innovation. The technology comes maybe from sportswear. And then it's translated now to a product, and it's super. So I experienced actually today the first time, and it's super comfortable. And I think it needs this dialogue from both sides. And you mentioned that it's amazing that young people are still, or even more nowadays, interested in crafts. But of course, they want to use also new technologies, and there are ways now to combine both. And you see it more and more on the products, like you can see here as well. And a product cannot be finished without a craftsman, but it can nowadays also not finished without technology. Otherwise, maybe also the price will explode and go up. So for me as a designer, we also have, sometimes you have a target price. You have to think about how can we solve it? What can we do best with the machine? What can we do best with human work and touch? Because at the end, we want to have something maybe with a certain, with the story behind is more and more important. This we have to tell. And I think Homo Faber is a great exhibition. They tell the story of crafts, that people are dedicating hours into a product like the rug, or if they do beautiful lacquerings and Japanese objects, for example. So all those beautiful treasures we appreciate, but we have to tell the story and give the possibility to the people, to the customers, to look more or less behind the scenes to understand.
Yeah, I 100% agree with this view. I think that it also, it becomes something else. You know, when you have, I don't know, you design this and you make a craft of something like this, and then you have to industrialize, it becomes another thing. So it's not that you're killing your product that was thought with the hand. You're evolving it, and it is good that it is an evolution. This hand knitted becomes a machine. It allows you to invent something new, to work more on the comfort, to work more on many things, to make it accessible to much more people, which is also important. It's if you see, for example, maybe most of you have seen the most famous lamp designed by Michele De Lucchis. Is an office lamp for Artemide. It's called Tolomeo. It's an office lamp that everybody has seen probably. In the same time, he was developing a series of lamp inspired by Leonardo da Vinci's macchine minime, the machines of Leonardo da Vinci. No? And that thinking became two very different type of products. It was growing out of the same mind, of the same thinking, but one became probably the most industrialized product, etc., with a mechanism that was referred to research that was done with craft. And with craft, now you can see Produzione Privata, which is a very small company that still manufactures one of these macchina minima lamps that moves, that goes around in a very different way. So again, the industrial process at a certain point takes two different paths. And maybe the importance is the core at the beginning. The ideas at the beginning are strong enough to make them evolve in very different ways. And one became a very accessible product to everybody can have and they can love, and it's extremely industrialized. And the other became a piece that a few people want to have to their home for their not working perfectly, but for the fact that it looks made by somebody in small quantity. So very, very different paths, but still, I strongly believe that they must and they can coexist.
Yeah, and absolutely right. There can be this sort of human idea in the beginning that is maintained even through the industrial process. And you raised, that's an interesting point too, because you have such a great focus on materials. And actually, we do need this industrial process to make certain materials available at scale, especially for sustainable materials.
Mhm.
So, I mean, are there any materials that you've worked with which wouldn't have been possible without, this sort of large scale industry?
It depends what you mean about large scale industry. I'm still working for, of course, there are furniture producers. They really do quantity. I work for a lot of companies do maybe 2,000 or 3,000 pieces, and like the glass table I mentioned, which is still blown close to Murano. Well, I would love to work, of course, on those large scale or big quantities, but maybe one day the possibility will come. But to be honest, I really enjoy those collaborations with the manufacturers, really to go there and work hands on with them and develop and have the time to get it to a certain level and to say, okay, now it's perfect. And I appreciate even sometimes maybe the price will go up, but I think people also need to understand that a crafted product or a high quality product has a certain price, no, at the end, and it's better to buy less and really appreciate and maybe to invest in something, like we invest maybe in an apartment or in an artwork, to see design also as an investment and not just about another thing. Let's see it also like a treasure. I said at the beginning that it's something with a strong story and identity in something I can maybe also hand over to someone else. I think that's also important. During COVID, I bought a couple of objects on eBay and then I put it on renovation or new upholstery. And I think that's also a very important aspect in design. And I think here we have to rethink also the way how we design, how we produce, how we communicate and sell products.
I'm curious because you're the head of international business for AMDL. I know you like to travel because we met in Bangalore, I think, 8 years ago or so. Are there any places that you've been, countries, recent trips, where you're really impressed with the craft or the industry? Maybe we'll start with you, Sebastian. I know you did the basket project in Zimbabwe.
Oh, the basket one in Zimbabwe. Yeah, that was a long time ago. I was invited by European Union to a brewer workshop at the Lake Kariba in Binga. It was just 3 weeks after Salone del Mobile, where I launched some of my first products and party and nice food and champagne. And then I came to Binga. It took me 1 day, 24 hours with a car to go there. There was no tap water, no electricity. But I met 20 women there doing basket with me, completely satisfied and happy and singing and dancing. And we were sitting there 2 weeks and doing baskets. And this was a kind of change in my head that we have to be even more satisfied in our way of living or location or how we can live nowadays. Even there are crises. Yesterday we had a talk about crisis. It's a big topic in Germany. There are just crisis. And we have to be actually a little bit more satisfied that we are living on this sunny side of the planet of life. And even there are crises, they can be also a possibility to change something. Yeah.
And you mentioned France, Japan. I know you.
Yeah, I think for us, Italy, I mentioned.
Yeah. Also Italy. Can't forget Italy.
No, I would. Of course, Japan is from this topic of craft. For us, it's very fascinating because it's the most different for us in way of thinking. Because it's really, I don't know. For example, we were visiting in Hokkaido, which is an island north of Japan. Just forest, rain, snow. No, and they have these little events like joinery championship. And we found there was like a room like this, and there were these 20 masters. They have a space of 1 meter by 1 meter, and then just a saw and hammer and a scalpel. Okay, and in 2 hours, they had to make the most extremely precise, complex, etc. joinery. So that was Michele had to judge it, to be the judge of this. But and you see the precision of the gesture, the repetition of the gesture, and then from a certain point of view, they were all the same. They were really trying to repeat the most complex that they know, but to do that one, and that is on one side it's fascinating. If we do the same in Italy, let's try to have things. Genre will be not strong, will not work, but maybe. So for us, it's very fascinating every time we go and we see this type of craft. This way in which you see how this gesture can be repeated in a way that you cannot really see the difference. I mean, if you take a video, it looks like a loop, and so, no, it's not a loop. It is really like 50 minutes doing the things, but with the same timing, the same gesture. And that is, I think, very, very fascinating. So, yeah, Japanese craft is...
especially the dedication into detail.
Yeah.
I bought a book about, I think, vases and containers made of bamboo once at Art Basel, Miami. Such a book, and it's beautiful. Just the packaging also of those objects, the wooden crates with a beautiful joint and hinge, and no, it's stunning.
Yeah, the precision and the gesture. The gesture really for me is very, if it's the way they learn how to do gesture when you do craft. It's very fascinating.
We have a couple more questions for both of you. You mentioned crises and kind of finding satisfaction. I remember in Milan you were talking about contentment and kind of resisting the pressure to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Do you personally feel like when you're able to really get into craft, that is kind of an escape? Like you can find contentment in craft?
Yeah, well, you're right. Journalists always ask me, what's your next? What is on your bucket list? And actually, there's nothing on my list. I really have to do a car or a plane or whatever. No, I'm really happy with the collaborations, also long-term collaborations with my clients, and to work on maybe families also. We maybe launched a chair and then we add a lounge chair and a bar stool. So it's growing, which is also more sustainable than to add a new product every year. I think we have to speed down and really work on more on the quality and the way how we can live and use and repair and so on a product we presented for in the next years. And you see it, I think, here and also on the fair that the companies are really working on this idea about the circular design or economy and so on.
And I remember in Milan, Leave It Be was a very inspiring kind of message at AMDL. What does Leave It Be mean for you?
We designed this. It's somehow a landscape design project. No? So now in some of our architecture and building that we're making, outside we built this circle made with a series of bricks in which there's written Leave It Be inside each of the brick. And then we say, okay, leave the space. So just control everything else, just cut the air, cut the trees, do everything, but don't do nothing inside that circle. No? And for us was a way of visualizing the space. So you start giving value to space. Now we build a lot as architects. We build, occupy. So you start visualizing the space, and you start visualizing time, and you start visualizing how the time and the nature influence in each of these Leave It Be. It's just, even if they're close one to another, they're totally different because a bird just throw a seed or another. So they're starting growing with this in this wilderness way of thinking. But we're not saying, okay, let's build a forest, a rough forest. No, we just said let's just have this element that shows that sometimes we must leave it be, that we cannot and we must not control everything. So it's a way that, for us, just it's a little sign that we are adding to some of our architecture, trying to reach this deeper level than what we always want to do with controlling everything, being sure that everything is perfect and defined. But there's so much value even in the things that are just left to leave.
Just nature gets to do her own craft in her own industry, basically.
You say how this?
Well, nature. Do you just let nature kind of do her own thing in this little circle?
Yeah, to do it its own things in an uncontrolled way, and to it also refers to the work that we do, of course, in architecture, interior, the natural material, just understanding that that's a value in making that becoming a bit old, in having some patina, changing through times. So it's a way of visualizing this and trying to understand that, yeah, we cannot control. I think a big enemy that we try to avoid for us is the style. When you see there are interiors architecture that are perfect, defined within a certain style, but you immediately understand that if you put something wrong in it, it will look wrong. And these things makes spaces, environments, everything fixed. And the only things that we know about human beings is that they constantly want to evolve, they constantly want to change, and even in this time, this is a changing that need to be faster. So the idea that you have spaces that are extremely controlled, that are so fixed in time and are not able to evolve, we believe that is, of course, it's fascinating on one side because of the ability of creating this perfect space, but we want to avoid that this thing stops the evolution, no? And so the imperfection that you can let into some spaces, the things that are unexpected, is something that, allows people to change these spaces, to transform. We really would love that our architecture, interior, etc. is, maybe after 1 year, you find this space, what the hell are they putting these things? But if the space was designed properly, if you design it with this attitude, not that of the style, we feel that the space can bring the evolution, or even of the people that are living. And so this live and be message, I think that when we relate it to real project interior, it is really about this, that we cannot and we must not control everything. We don't have to close because everything evolves and we need to let it free to evolve.
And you do a wondrous job designing objects that feel like they can be any place, any time, really. Is that conscious, or is that just your natural style, or what do you think?
Yeah, well, at the end, there's always the moment I have to say, okay, the product is finished. Now we present it on the fair. And then it's for me this let it be moment, because we are doing interiors just a little bit, not like a studio and architecture. So I will spot my products then on Instagram or in a magazine. And sometimes I'm happy with the setting. Sometimes maybe not, because I cannot tell my clients, okay, you are just allowed to upholster the sofa in this certain fabric. So someone wants to have a flower one, the other one maybe with a dog pattern, whatever. So
leave it be.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. And sometimes I screenshot the interior and repost, and sometimes I just continue.
Yeah. All right, so before we move on to Q&A, I have one more question. I was fascinated to realize that both of y'all have gone back to teach at your alma maters. So you at the European Institute of Design, you at Offenbach University of Art and Design. What was it like going back to teach at the place where you learned, where you studied?
Well, I actually did at the beginning. I don't do anymore.
Well, back when.
Yeah. I sometimes do lectures. Yeah, but sometimes university asks me if I would like to become a professor, but at the moment I'm not old enough. Now I have classes. No, this was the next step since 1 year. So it's the first time I feel comfortable to be in design public with classes. Normally I hide it here, but maybe now I'm look more serious with the gray hair also. Yeah, maybe then in 10 years, maybe I think about going back to Offenbach, to a university, but at the moment, no. No, we are busy. So no, I really enjoy to be with my team and travel. And now we have a toddler now, 14 months old. So it's busy enough.
Busy enough.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Yeah, no, I like to go back there. I think that the nicest, not the nicest, the thing that I've learned in teaching is to answer quickly. I mean, in the office, when you just do this design, and maybe the guy says, I'm not sure why. Okay, let's do and let's try. No, when you just go to the school and you have revision, I don't know, every month or something. No, they came and they made you a question. No, and you cannot just say, okay, I'll come later. I'll think about it. In that time, you understand that you need to tell them something that it's meaningful, possibly, in a very short time. So I think that was very, very useful for me. And on the other end is of course, you see in 20, 22 years, the evolution of people, of young students, especially in this school. I would say that 80% of my students are not from Italy, so they really come abroad, and it's always interesting to see how they see design when they come from India, when they come from. It's very much related to where they come from and where they grow and how they're. I mean, if you stress them, you really see that the environment in which they grow is the main educator, probably for them, as being the main educator, and so they're bringing it into the project, and I really love to see these things. It's something, even at the office, as much as we can. Of course, if we can hire people that are from many, many different countries, that's really big plus, very, very big plus for us, because you have perspective from the world that are so different, but they contribute to one single type of product.
And what I realize when I do a workshop or a lecture is that they are much more critical nowadays, the students, than maybe 20 years ago. So there are different topics like the climate change, sustainability, circular economy. So their requests or their ideas, or it's completely different than 20 years ago. It was more about industrialization and shape and things like this. Now it's more, let's say, also political.
Good. Yeah, that's...
Well, I'm sure you're tired of my questions. Let's see if anybody else has any questions for y'all.
My question would be, we talked about craft and industry. When I look from the consumer perspective, people are willing to pay more for a crafted limited edition object than probably for an industrial product. But the start was the same, but you stopped at some point, and then maybe it's limited edition, and all of a sudden it becomes something special. Do people are willing to pay more for it and collect it just because it's like the story is limited, so a different story behind it, and didn't become a mass product? Saying that from a Haworth perspective sounds bad, but if the chair would be like a single object and the only one crafted, would it be worth more to consumers than like a mass product?
But limited editions are really just for a niche, for a small quantity of people going then to Art Basel, Miami, or Galerie Clio in Paris and paying 120,000 for a table. Of course, it would be nice, also interesting as a designer, really to work on something very special. But for me, it's interesting really to work on bigger scale, bigger quantities of a product. Even some of my products, if they're not so successful, could be also kind of limited edition, but affordable. But you never know. So the client also don't know. I think both is quite interesting. I think with the limited edition, you have a much bigger freedom. You can go really crazy if the gallery believes in you. But of course, working with a brand like Haworth, or I just launched something with Buzzy Space, you have a little bit, or you have to think commercial, and that it works in different scenarios and contexts in a hotel or in an office building and so on. Because at the end, as a designer, you want to sell, or the company has to sell quantity that you earn your royalties to pay the diapers for the little one.
I have also a question. You mentioned craftsmanship, Italian, Japanese, and French. I believe one good thing of the globalization is the fact that people can move and maybe cultures can melt, and maybe the pure craftsmanship of one origin or one culture isn't that pure anymore. And I have a good friend, she's from Niederolm, close to Mainz. She moved to Mallorca. she discovered the very traditional way of Majorican weaving. She's one of the people who are now conserving it, like selling products with that very traditional way. Being born somewhere in Germany, now living there, not even speaking the language, but making sure that this craftsmanship is being conserved. Have you seen anything like that anywhere else where you basically could see like melting or fusion of things that were very developed like for a very long term somewhere else and then got kind of being brought into a different environment or a different context?
Yeah, I think that when I simplify this world into Italian, French, and Japanese craft, for us in the office is a way of calling it. In the sense that, I don't know, I've been in China and I said, oh, I've been to a very Japanese craft. Oh, I was in China and I said, oh, this is a very Italian manufacturers. So, I mean, for us, it's a way of calling these three ways of thinking about design. And of course, they are melting, yes. And there's happening everywhere. I mean, there's what I call Japanese craft in Indonesia, and there is French craft in Brazil. In reality, it's our way of calling, in a way that with the three words we identify a typology of craft. But I think really it's not anymore really related to a country. Yes, it's true that France is helping very much this type of craft. It's true that Japan as well is protecting part of the craft. But yeah, I think it's a way of thinking about craft and doing that can happen really everywhere. I mean, just really visiting a small part of China, I think I found all the three different type of craft within China on high quality. So, and I think this is positive. This is very good. It's not that, because otherwise, like made in France, made in Italy, made in Japan is just kind of a label that you apply on it. It's good that different type of craft, and both of them are extremely valuable in each of both. Sorry, there are three. These three types of craft are good, and it's good that it happen everywhere in the world.
And as long as it's authentic and honest, not just the branding stamp at the end done in the country. And you see it also in the universities, like also in Milan or in German universities, that they become more and more international. Or European professors or designers teach in China or other Asian universities. So that's not anymore like this is typical Italian, Danish, or whatever design. You see so many international couples living, or Camfatesi, for example, in Denmark together. Asian friends living in Amsterdam, but with a background there. But he educated in Holland and now working for international brands. So it's melding. I think that makes it so interesting.
Other questions?
All right. To close us out, I would love to hear from both of y'all a message for our younger designers who are just kind of getting started. What would you say to them to encourage them as they begin their design journey? Maybe we'll start with you, Sebastian.
Yeah, most important, of course, is to be visible. So I attended many platforms for young designers and stay in contact with the other participants of the Salone Satellite. So I always meet them on different fairs again, and we support each other, which is also good. And I think, yeah, like I said, try to find your own way of working, identity, and it takes time and belief in yourself. So for me, it was also like 5 years knocking doors and running around. And but I think if you want to be a designer and work as a designer, I think it's the best job. And it's at the end is a privilege because you can travel to Bangalore and other places around the world and meeting amazing people and discover the craft, like going as a judge to Japan to discover joints. And I think it's a privilege, no? You would never experience something like this as a normal tourist in a country. So for me, it's a lot of joy and passion.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. I think it's really important for young designers to really understand deeper what they like, what is interesting for them, what is the type of of design that interests. Because really the risk, from what I see at least, is that because now they use the AI, they see so many information that they are collecting, that then they're not able to define, no? And when some students come to our office, it's a 5-story building, etc., and they say, "Can we take pictures?" We say, I mean, at least what I do. I said, "Yes, one." So I said, choose one thing that you find is really the one that you love, and then copy, redo, retry to make it. But I think that's really defining who you are, what you like, what is for you the good and the bad. In making this first step, it's very relevant to avoid to just do things and search for trends and search for inspiration everywhere, and then the risk is you lose your identity, or you cannot build your own identity and your own path.
Thank you both so much. Dankeschön, grazie mille.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Luke.